A home no longer hers. The grand estate stood silent, its towering pillars casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. The house, once full of warmth and laughter, now felt hollow, like a monument to a life that no longer existed. The scent of polished wood and aged books still lingered in the air, but it was overpowered by something else, an emptiness that settled in every corner like an unwanted guest. Emma Green stood at the edge of the sprawling garden, her fingers clenched into tight fists. The wind tugged at her hair, whipping it into her face, but she barely noticed. Her father, Gregory Green, had built this house with love and dreams, a symbol of success and security. And now, it was gone. Her father was gone. Her world was gone. Gregory had passed away unexpectedly a month ago, leaving behind a legacy of wealth, but also a void too large to fill. Emma was only 18, barely an adult, and yet she felt like she had lived a lifetime in the last few weeks. The days had blurred into a haze of condolences, legal discussions, and silent dinners with her stepmother, Laura. Laura, the woman who had entered their lives when Emma was barely 10. She had always been cold, distant, more of a polite stranger than a mother. Her father had loved her, or at least Emma had believed so, but that love never seemed to extend to his daughter. Laura had tolerated Emma's presence, nothing more. And now, without Gregory to bind them together, Emma knew the tolerance had run out. Emma. Laura's sharp voice cut through the chilly air. Emma turned slowly. Laura stood at the doorway, her hands crossed over her chest, eyes void of warmth. The house loomed behind her like a silent witness to whatever was about to unfold. "Come inside," Laura said, her tone even but emotionless. "We need to talk." Something about her voice sent a shiver down Emma's spine. There was no grief, no sadness, only a quiet finality. Emma had learned long ago that Laura's words were carefully chosen, each one carrying weight, and today they carried something else, an air of control, of power. Emma hesitated, glancing once more at the gardens where she and her father used to walk. The roses had started to wither without his careful attention, much like everything else in this house. Swallowing hard, she followed Laura inside. The main hall was eerily quiet. Most of the staff had been dismissed after the funeral, leaving the mansion emptier than ever. The echo of their footsteps rang in Emma's ears as Laura led her into the sitting room. The grand fireplace was unlit, the air slightly cold despite the sunlight streaming in through the tall windows. Laura walked to the window, staring outside as if gathering her thoughts. Emma sat stiffly on the couch, waiting. Finally, Laura turned around. "I've sold the house." The words hit Emma like a slap. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she thought she had misheard. "You what?" Her voice came out hoarse. "I've sold the house," Laura repeated, her gaze unwavering. "The money will cover the funeral costs. And, well, I need to move on." Move on. As if Emma's entire life could be packed up and discarded like old furniture. "This is my home," Emma whispered, her voice shaking. "My father's home." "Was," Laura corrected, her expression unreadable. "Your father is gone, Emma. This house is nothing but an empty shell now. It's time to let it go." Emma's hands curled into fists on her lap. "And where am I supposed to go?" Laura tilted her head slightly, as if the question had no weight. "I've made arrangements for you. There's an orphanage in town. You'll be staying there." Silence. For a moment, Emma thought she had imagined the words, that they couldn't possibly be real. The weight of them settled like a stone in her stomach. "The orphanage," she repeated in disbelief. "Yes," Laura said simply, as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "It will be best for you." Emma shot up from the couch, her heartbeat hammering against her ribs. "You're throwing me away like garbage. You can't do this." Laura's expression remained calm, almost detached. "I can, and I have." Emma's chest tightened with a fury she had never felt before. How could this woman, her father's wife, be so heartless? She had barely had time to grieve before Laura was sweeping her out like an unwanted guest. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "He wouldn't have wanted this," she said through gritted teeth. Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your father isn't here anymore, Emma. His wishes don't matter now." Emma stumbled back, the words like a dagger to her chest. She could barely breathe. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "This isn't right." Laura sighed, almost as if she were tired of this conversation. "Pack your things. You need to be out by the morning." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there, shattered. The room spun around her, the walls closing in. She staggered backward until her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees on the cold marble floor. A sob escaped her lips, but she quickly swallowed it down. No, she wouldn't break. Not here. Not in front of Laura. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, breathing in and out, forcing herself to think. There had to be a way out of this. She wasn't some helpless child. She wouldn't let Laura erase her from this house, from her father's legacy. As she sat there, shaking with anger and grief, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the empty mansion, loud and intrusive. Emma opened her eyes, her breath catching in her throat. A strange feeling settled in her gut. Something was about to change, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The will that changed everything. The chime of the doorbell echoed through the vast, empty mansion, a sound too sharp, too sudden in the suffocating silence. Emma remained frozen on the cold marble floor, her fingers pressing into the smooth surface as if grounding herself in reality. A strange feeling coiled in her stomach. Dread. Anticipation. Something she couldn't quite name. She turned her head slowly toward the entrance hall, where Laura's stiff figure stood in the doorway. Emma watched, her heart pounding, as her stepmother reached for the handle, her movements precise, controlled. Laura never did anything without calculation, and Emma could tell she wasn't expecting visitors. The heavy door creaked open, revealing a tall man dressed in a dark gray suit. He carried a sleek black briefcase in one hand, and his face was unreadable, though there was an air of authority about him. His sharp eyes swept over Laura before landing on Emma, still kneeling on the floor. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice steady, professional. "I'm Richard Monroe, executor of Mr. Gregory Green's estate. I assume you are Mrs. Green." His gaze flickered to Laura. Laura hesitated, and for the first time, Emma saw something she hadn't before. Uncertainty. "Yes," Laura finally said, her voice smooth but lacking its usual sharp edge. "I am. And this must be Emma Green." Monroe continued, his eyes now focused entirely on her. Emma pushed herself to her feet, brushing her hands against her jeans, suddenly hyper-aware of how disheveled she must have looked. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. Monroe nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I've come regarding the reading of Mr. Green's will." A tense silence followed. Emma's heart skipped a beat. The will. She hadn't even thought about it in the chaos of losing her father. It had never crossed her mind. What he left behind. What he wanted for her. But now, as Monroe stood in the doorway with that briefcase, reality hit her all at once. Laura recovered quickly, her expression smoothing into polite indifference. "I wasn't aware there was anything left to discuss. I assumed." "You assumed incorrectly, Mrs. Green," Monroe cut in, his tone polite but firm. "There are still matters to be settled, including the rightful inheritance of Mr. Green's assets." Laura stiffened ever so slightly. Emma didn't miss it. A spark of something ignited in her chest. Could it be hope? Monroe cleared his throat. "If we may sit down, I'll explain everything." For the first time in days, Emma saw something shift in Laura's face. Fear. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "Of course," Laura said smoothly, stepping aside. "Please, come in." Monroe entered the mansion with a quiet confidence, and Emma trailed behind, unsure of what to expect. Her stepmother led them into the study, her father's study, a room Emma hadn't stepped foot in since the day he passed. The scent of aged books and leather furniture wrapped around her like a memory, suffocating and comforting all at once. Monroe placed his briefcase on the desk, flicking the locks open with practiced ease. He retrieved a thick folder and set it down carefully before looking at both of them. As per Mr. Green's will, he began, flipping open the file. His entire estate, including this property, his financial assets, and his business holdings, have been left to his sole heir. Emma barely breathed. Monroe turned to her. Emma Green. A stunned silence filled the study. Emma felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. She blinked, struggling to process what she had just heard. She owned the house, the business, everything. She turned to Laura, expecting shock, maybe even devastation. But what she saw instead sent a chill through her bones. Rage. It was brief, a flicker of pure, undiluted anger in Laura's otherwise carefully constructed mask. But it was there. Monroe, oblivious to the storm brewing beside him, continued. As of this moment, Emma, you are the legal heir to your father's fortune. However, he paused, flipping another page. The will specifies that the inheritance is placed under a protective trust. You will gain full control when you turn 21. Emma swallowed hard. 3 years. Laura, regaining her composure, leaned back in her chair. And until then, she asked, her voice deceptively calm. Monroe didn't flinch. Until then, the estate is under legal protection. No changes can be made. No assets can be sold or transferred without Emma's consent. Emma's eyes widened. Laura had sold the house. Her stomach twisted. Did Monroe know? She barely had time to process before Laura leaned forward, her fingers clasped together as if in thought. That's quite unexpected, she murmured. Are you sure there are no amendments? No revisions? Monroe gave her a cool smile. I assure you, Mrs. Green, I am well aware of the legal standing of this will, and it is final. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Laura's fingers curled against the armrest, her knuckles white. Emma felt it, too. A shift. A change. Laura had underestimated her father. She had expected to take everything without resistance. But now, all of her carefully laid plans were unraveling. Emma, still in shock, turned toward Monroe. So what does this mean? For me? Monroe adjusted his tie. It means you are not required to leave this house. You are, by all legal rights, its owner. Laura's lips parted, but no sound came out. Monroe wasn't finished. Furthermore, any financial actions taken against the estate in the past month will be reviewed for legality. Emma's breath caught in her throat. He knew. The house sale. Emma turned to Laura, whose face was now a shade paler than before. Monroe closed the folder with a crisp snap. If any unauthorized transactions have taken place, they will be nullified. Emma could almost hear the house itself sigh in relief. It wasn't lost. It wasn't taken away. Laura, however, was a different story. Her stepmother stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. This is a lot to take in, she said smoothly, forcing a smile. If you'll excuse me, I need a moment. Without waiting for a response, she strode out of the room, her heels clicking against the floor with sharp precision. Monroe turned to Emma. You'll need to be careful, he said quietly. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Your stepmother. Monroe shut his briefcase and met her eyes with something almost like concern. She isn't going to accept this easily. Emma already knew that. She felt it in her bones. Laura had been stripped of what she wanted most, control, and Emma had a terrible feeling that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, the final stand. The night was darker than usual. The grand estate, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. Its walls holding secrets Emma could barely comprehend. She sat on the edge of her father's old chair in the study, the dim glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The weight of the will, of everything it had revealed, pressed down on her like an invisible force. Gregory Greene had left her everything. The house, the business, the wealth, it was all hers. But more importantly, he had left her a choice. She thought back to the last few days, the confrontation with Laura, the quiet, simmering rage beneath her stepmother's mask, the way she had tried to push Emma out, to erase her from the life she had every right to. Laura had always played the long game, always calculated her moves with precision. But this time, she had miscalculated. Emma wasn't leaving. She was staying. A noise outside the study pulled her from her thoughts. A shuffle. A footstep too light, too careful. Her breath caught. She turned her head slowly toward the door, heart hammering against her ribs. And then, it swung open. Laura stood there, dressed in a simple black coat, her posture stiff, her eyes unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Laura took a step inside, shutting the door quietly behind her. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said, voice smooth, almost amused. Emma remained still. "You never wanted me here." Laura exhaled, almost laughing under her breath. "No, I didn't." She walked to the bookshelf, running her fingers lightly over the spines of old books, her expression unreadable. "You think this is over, don't you? That just because my name isn't on a piece of paper, I'll simply walk away." Emma's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to remain calm. "It is over, Laura. You lost." Laura turned then, eyes sharp. "No, Emma. I didn't lose. You just don't realize what you've inherited yet." Something in her tone made the hairs on the back of Emma's neck rise. Laura took slow, deliberate steps toward her, stopping just short of the desk. "Your father was a powerful man. But power always comes with a cost." Emma swallowed, but didn't back down. "There are people," Laura continued, tilting her head slightly, "who don't like the way Gregory did things. People who were waiting for the right moment to take everything. They thought it would be easy with him gone. And now," she gave Emma a slow, knowing smile, "they see you as an obstacle." Emma's pulse quickened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I could have handled it," Laura said simply. "I knew how to manage them, how to keep them at bay. But you're a child playing in a world you don't understand." Emma clenched her fists. "I may not understand everything yet, but I know one thing. You're not in control anymore." Laura let out a quiet laugh. "We'll see about that." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. And then something unexpected happened. Laura stepped back. Her shoulders relaxed, her lips curled into something that almost resembled amusement. "Fine," she said with a small shrug. "Keep the house. Keep the fortune. Keep the name. See how far it gets you." Emma narrowed her eyes. Laura tilted her head, studying her one last time before turning toward the door. And just as she reached for the handle, she paused. Without looking back, she spoke. "Be careful, Emma." And then she was gone. Emma sat frozen, listening as Laura's footsteps disappeared down the hall. A strange sensation settled in her chest. Not relief, not victory, but something heavier. Laura had left. But Emma knew better than to think she was gone. This wasn't the end of the battle. It was only the beginning. She had won the war inside these walls. But outside, the real fight was waiting. And Emma Greene was ready. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.